Lisa has always been the best part of my life. I lived alone for a long time, without a husband, and her love and support were my greatest achievement. She has always been there for me, even when I was on the verge of collapse. It seems that there is no better feeling for a mother than when your child grows up and you see him or her become an independent, strong person. But no matter how optimistic we try to be about our children, they can still change over time. Elisa has always dreamed of her own home. She said many times how much she wanted to have her own apartment where she could live on her own terms. And I, having some capital, decided that this would be my big gift for her. I had been planning this decision for a long time, and now the moment had come when I could give her more than just words of support. As a mom, I always wanted to give her the best. We discussed it more than once, and she was excited about the prospect. But with every step, with every minute of this big deal, I felt more and more tension. My child was becoming an adult, and I was getting older. What if this gesture is not appreciated the way I hope it will be? What if Lisa herself opposes my decision? But I'm not just giving her an apartment. I'm giving her my heart, my support, my faith in her abilities. This moment was so important to me, and I wanted it to remain in her memory. I wanted her to remember how I gave her the last resources I had worked with for so long. My work, my years. I could have kept this apartment for myself, for my old age, but I decided that it was better to give it to Lisa. She deserves it more than anyone. And it wasn't just about material things, it was my form of love that had to exceed everything else. I realized more and more that by deciding to give her the apartment, I was leaving myself vulnerable. My gesture seemed like a feat, but was Lisa ready to appreciate it? And wouldn't this gift be just another way for her to appropriate what belonged to me? I could not even guess how she really felt about it. Good mom, you're not kidding, right? Lisa asked me this question for the first time when I voiced my idea. I could hear some wariness in her voice. She looked grateful, of course, but there was something in her eyes that I didn't like. I decided to ignore it. After all, it was my decision, and I believed that I was doing the best for her. The next week I signed all the documents. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. I handed the keys to the apartment to Lisa. She promised to take care of it, to improve it, and to keep the memory of my gesture alive. I couldn't have been happier. After all, I did it for her. She got her own apartment. And I was satisfied that I could make her life a little easier. But immediately after I left her alone at home, I felt a longing that I could not turn back time. I could no longer be sure that my decision was right. I began to feel afraid that maybe in some way I was in too much of a hurry. It was only the beginning, and I didn't even know what consequences I could expect from this step. But the decision had already been made, and I left her with this property, albeit with anxiety. I left Lisa in her new apartment and came home. But with each passing day, I began to feel strange changes. She didn't call me, didn't ask if I was worried about her new life. I started to notice that she no longer addressed me the way she used to. It was like putting a distance in a minute that I couldn't understand. This gift was everything to her. But for some reason, I began to feel that by giving her the apartment, I had given away not only my property, but also a part of myself. Would Lisa really appreciate it? Wouldn't all of this be just another step for her in achieving something bigger? And would she be grateful for everything I had done for her? Well, now all I had to do was wait. Wait for everything to fall into place. But for some reason I felt that this gift was only the beginning of serious changes in our lives. Lisa became different. I noticed it in the first days after I handed her the keys to the apartment. At first I tried to ignore it, because everything seemed to be in its place. I gave her an apartment, the best gift I could give her. She was happy. Her eyes shone with that sparkle I had seen so often before. But over time, something began to change. And these changes were not entirely pleasant for me. At first, everything was going well. Lisa told me about her plans for the renovation, enthusiastically shared her ideas for the new interior. I know I always supported her, approving of everything she did. But then little things began to appear that I couldn't ignore. She stopped calling and writing to me as often as she used to. The conversations no longer had the warm emotions that they had before. Instead of, "Mom, how are you?" I heard more and more often, "Mom, don't bother me now, I'm busy." Her coldness became noticeable even in her voice. Wasn't my eye, it was strange. Wasn't my goal to make this apartment a support for her. But for some reason, it seemed more and more that her attitude toward me was changing. That evening, when I decided to call and ask her how she was doing, Lisa just brushed it off. She said she had a lot of work to do and couldn't talk right now. She was busy with her new plans. And I couldn't understand if I hadn't become just a means to an end for her. With each new call, I could feel the distance that began to appear between us. She no longer treated me the way she used to. But there was no warmth, no conversations about life as before. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, or if she really became more distant. I felt that Lisa didn't need my help or support as much anymore. The apartment was hers, and she seemed to be really focused on her new responsibilities, her new position in life. I had a feeling of being useless. Hadn't I become just another part of her life that she was trying to forget? And even worse, had I become a burden to her? The gift which was supposed to be a symbol of my love now seemed like something that led to distancing. She started inviting guests more often. I noticed this when I came to visit a week after I handed over the apartment to her. She greeted me as usual with a friendly smile, but something was wrong. When I opened the door, I saw not only new furniture in her apartment, but also people I didn't know. They were young people, her friends, who seemed to need the apartment more than I did. I was sitting there in her new apartment and couldn't shake the feeling that it had all become something completely different. Elisa no longer needed my advice, my support. She was with other people, with other plans, with new rules of life. And I realized that I was no longer a part of those plans. At that moment, I asked myself, was I wrong to give her this? Or maybe I did it to make her feel needed. Perhaps I had become just another thing that Lisa would take for herself and forget. And me. Was I still an important part of her life? Or is it more important for her now how well she feels when I'm not around? With each new day, I felt more and more that my doubts were not unfounded. Lisa was becoming more distant, and there was less and less room for me in her new life. I couldn't understand why this was happening. I was ready to give her everything, but she seemed to want only a part of it. I decided that I could not sit idly by. If I wanted my relationship with Lisa to remain warm, I had to do something. I couldn't let the distance between us get so big. I gave her an apartment, and now I have to fight to not lose her forever. Maybe she just doesn't realize that she is important to me, that I still want to be a part of her life. With this thought in mind, I started to act. The first thing I did was to schedule a small meeting. I had a plan. I would cook dinner, she would come, we would talk, laugh together, remember old times. Everything was going to be just like it used to be. I was going to cook her favorite dish, pasta with seafood, wine, fruit for dessert. It was supposed to turn back the clock, to bring back at least some of the warmth that used to be between us. Lisa agreed to come, but again, it was with the feeling that her participation in this dinner was more of an obligation than a desire. When she came, I could tell right away that her look was different. At first, she said she was very tired and that she would not be able to stay long. I managed to notice how she looked at the table with food in surprise, but again she didn't say anything. We sat down and I started talking. I wanted to know how she was doing, if everything was okay in her new apartment. She answered briefly, laconically, without showing any enthusiasm. She said that everything was fine, but then she started talking about work again. Her conversation revolved around new plans, projects, and people she met. I sat and listened like an outsider. No, this was not what I wanted. I wanted more. I wanted to see the same Lisa I used to raise, who laughed at my jokes, who loved what I cooked. And now her place was taken by other people's conversations, work, other people. I was only interested in how she had changed, and she was already too far away. To create an atmosphere, I suggested that we go for a walk after dinner. I thought maybe some fresh air would help us talk and ease the tension. She agreed, but again I felt that it was more out of politeness than a genuine desire to spend time with me. We left, but the conversation didn't go well. Lisa talked about what was happening at work, then mentioned some new friends she had met in recent weeks. I couldn't believe it. Why can't I get answers to simple questions? What can't she share her experiences, her life, with me? At least once this evening. I tried to remember the last time we really laughed together, but such moments seemed far away to me, like something from another life, and so we walked through the park in silence. And I felt that every step only increased the distance between us. It was so cold, not only because of the weather, but also because of the atmosphere, and my Lisa was different, and I didn't know what to do with it. I tried to push her to talk, but she just nodded, answering in short phrases. I began to realize that I had no right to interfere in her life. She had grown up. She had found her place in the world, and I didn't seem to be an important part of that world anymore. It was a cruel reality that I had to accept. And my attempts to rekindle the old relationship only led to an even greater sense of detachment. And then, at some point, we stopped at a bench. Lisa turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes that surprised me even more. She looked like she wanted to say something, but something was holding her back. And I didn't know what it was. We stood in silence, and this moment dragged on. Perhaps it was the last attempt to save at least a part of our relationship. Do I really still have a chance to get back what we had? Or maybe all this is just an attempt to attach myself to something that has already become the past. The day I had been waiting for so long had finally arrived. It was such an ordinary, yet important question for me. I decided that all I could do for Lisa was to give her one more small step towards stability. Long before that, I had decided that I would give her an apartment so that she would no longer have to worry about housing, so that she could feel comfortable. But after I gave it to her, her reaction began to be alarming. Lisa started to appear less and less often. As soon as she received the keys to the apartment, she began to avoid my calls and even refused to meet together, which were once important to us. Was this how it was supposed to be? I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. What happened to the Lisa I knew? I noticed the first changes the next week when she didn't show up to my lunch invitation. I wasn't upset. I realized that she had her own family routine and work. But her refusal felt like some kind of distance. She didn't want to meet as before. Apparently, she was busy with something more important. A few days later, I called Lisa to invite her to a party at a friend's house. Instead of enthusiasm and joy, I heard her cold voice, which no room for emotion. "Mom, I just can't. I have things to do. I'm tired." And again, that detachment. This was not a case where I could understand that she just didn't want to. I felt that something had changed, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Then more small remarks began to appear on her part. For example, the last time we ate together, she snapped at me over a trifle. "Why are you still trying to control my life?" "I'm an adult!" These words sank into my soul. I just wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to feel at home in her new apartment. But for her, it had already become an interference. I did not say anything to this remark. Instead of getting into an argument, I just silently took it as another sign that things were not going as I had planned. After a while, I noticed another interesting thing. Lisa started spending more time with other people. It was her new way of life. She had always been so withdrawn, and now she even had new friends to whom she did not invite me. I can't remember a time when she would have been so happy to go out for coffee or a walk with someone. Her emotional barrier was getting higher and higher, and I didn't know how to get to her heart anymore. Those first lunches, when we laughed, discussed all the news, exchanged secrets, seemed far away, as if they were from another life. And then, one day, I got another piece of bad news. Lisa wrote me a message saying that she had decided to register the apartment in her own name. It sounded like a somewhat minor matter, but it was a real blow to me. How could she? Why couldn't she just leave it at that? Why did everything have to change so much? The answer was obvious. She increasingly felt like the owner of this space, not a person who received support from her mother. I tried to explain that I didn't give her the apartment so that she could emphasize her independence in this way. I just wanted to give her a chance. But from that moment on, I realized that it was not just a matter of an apartment. It was a symbol of changes in our relationship. Lisa no longer perceived me as a close person whom she could respect. I became more of an obligation to her than someone who gave her something important. I began to feel powerless. I decided to talk to Lisa again, to ask her to give me a chance, to put things back to the way they were. I wanted to get some kind of explanation from her, to understand where exactly we had made a mistake. But what if I had already missed everything? What if it had become inevitable and I couldn't bring back what was before? Then she said a phrase to me that seemed small, but left a deep mark on me. "Mom, you don't understand. Lago and I've grown up." I tried to understand why these words hurt more than any other, but I never got an answer. What to do now? Life seemed to be hard for me. Everything I did for Lisa. I worked to provide for her. I took care of her even when I didn't have the strength. I gave her an apartment because I wanted her to be happy. Though I wanted her to have no difficulties in the future, to not have to go through what I had to go through. But the more I tried to give her, the more difficult it became for me. Not only emotionally, but also financially. That was the moment when I felt that my options were limited. The gift I gave Lisa was supposed to be a springboard for her to a better life. But it turned out to be another big responsibility for me. The debts I had accumulated because of helping Lisa started to show. I had always tried to maintain financial stability, but the reality was ruthless. My bank account was melting away. And then, one day, I received another message from the bank. It was a letter stating that I had exceeded the limit on my card. Again and again, I signed loans, trying to keep a balance between my desires and my capabilities. But I couldn't afford to let Lisa down. She was my only hope. But all these expenses began to hit me like a rock, throwing me into a desperate situation. Should I take out another loan? But it was already impossible. And I worked harder, but it wasn't enough. My debt problems were getting bigger and bigger. I would sit in the evenings looking through the papers with payments, feeling more and more fearful each time. It was hard to hide all these debts from Lisa. I didn't want her to see her mom in this situation. I realized that she was growing more and more distant from me, and now this financial instability could be the last straw. If I used to cope with difficulties, now every day was more than just a struggle. Lisa began to notice that I was often nervous and unable to concentrate. I was like a living shadow, trying to do everything so that she wouldn't see everything falling apart. But her eyes were already asking for more than just a desire to be with me. She demanded more time, more attention, more money. And then, like a bolt from the blue, I realized that I couldn't give her that anymore. I no longer had the energy and money to fulfill all her whims. "Mom, I need this new sofa," Lisa said the next time I visited her. It will fit perfectly in my room, and can you help me?" I felt her words hurt like another knife in my heart. She did not realize that I could not give her more. She didn't see that every request she made only plunged me deeper into debt. My attempts to be a good mother and make her life better led to even more financial difficulties. I tried to keep all these experiences to myself, but with each new request from Lisa, I felt my inner world falling apart more and more. I couldn't show her my weakness anymore, because I realized that if she found out that I was on the verge of bankruptcy, it would push her away from me completely. Under the pressure of my debts, which kept increasing, I felt my soul was crumbling more and more. From time to time, I tried to ask Lisa for forgiveness for not being able to give her more, but her reaction was so cold and alienated that I sank even deeper into my problems. "Mom, I don't know what you want from me. You're always so stressed out that you don't notice how I'm trying to live my life," Lisa said, and her words hit me like a stone. Now all I can do is just try to survive. Will Lisa stay, or will she continue her journey without me? Will I have the strength to fix everything? I know one thing, I can't carry everything anymore. What will happen to us? Will she stay with me, or will I be even more isolated? I don't know the answer, and it's scary. Not a few days have passed since I tried to call Liza. At first it was just a minor concern. Maybe she was just busy, maybe she hadn't noticed the call yet. Maybe she hadn't heard the message. But a week without any communication from my daughter, it started to gradually turn into anxiety. I had dialed her number several times already, and each time only treacherous silence answered on the other end. No answer, no explanation. At first, I tried to stay calm. Maybe I was just late at work or with friends. Maybe the connection was bad. But when this week, and then another, didn't change anything, I felt something starting to press on me. Something was changing. Elisa, my only daughter, who until recently was ready to call me for trifles, was no longer interested in contact. And I, as her mother, could not help but notice it. She did not answer the phone. Text messages went unanswered. I sat in the empty apartment, trying to understand what had happened over and over again. Had I done something wrong? Or maybe I was no longer needed. After all, everything was different before. Elisa always found time to call me, even when I didn't ask for anything big. And now there was silence. I tried to get her to talk to me, writing her messages saying, "I'm thinking about you. How are you? Is everything okay?" But there was no response. I was overcome with fear, so terrible that I couldn't even say how I felt. It was not just anxiety. It was a feeling of being pushed away, as if I no longer mattered to the person I loved so much and for whom I had worked so hard. It was unbearably difficult for me to realize that perhaps some new barrier had appeared between us. Then I started contacting my friends to find out if they had any information. Perhaps someone knew where she was, why she wasn't responding. But even here I was met with emptiness, and no one knew where she was and no one could explain her strange silence. My calls to her friends and colleagues went unanswered. Everyone tried to be polite, but I felt that something was wrong. Something had changed, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And then, after a few days of no communication, I realized that my suspicions were not accidental. I began to remember all those moments when everything seemed to be normal. When Lisa still paid attention to how I was feeling, whether I was doing well. And now there was some kind of gap between us that couldn't be filled. She had changed. She was no longer the friendly, caring daughter I had known. But the worst part was that I couldn't even imagine what had really happened. What could have changed Lisa so much? Or perhaps I myself had become part of this change. One big question arose: why? What made her pull away from me so abruptly? Did I do something wrong? Maybe I was giving her too much, and she was getting tired of this endless dependence. I even thought that maybe there was something more to it than that. But maybe she had met someone. Maybe someone else had become more important than me, and that could be what caused this change. After all, I remember very well how she proudly showed me her new company, her new acquaintances. But then it all seemed normal to me. Now I was not so sure about everything that was happening in her life. Now I could no longer tell if it was just a space filled with new people and events, or if it was an act of alienation. The silence was unnatural and painful, and it was getting deeper every day. It was hard for me to admit, but this silent withdrawal from me seemed more than just a normal breakup. It was like a final farewell. and I began to feel that I would never be able to go back to what we had before. My soul could not calm down. This silence from Lisa, which lasted for so long, became unbearable. I was already prepared to learn nothing. But one day, when I went to her house, unable to bear it any longer, the whole truth was revealed to me. As usual, I left without warning. Maybe it was my mistake, but I couldn't take this unknown anymore. And it seemed to me that if I saw her face to face, everything would be revealed. What would she say? What would she feel if I were there? When I arrived at her apartment, the door was open. I walked in, and there, standing in my way, was Lisa, but she looked nothing like I remembered. She was cold and aloof. The look I met was unfamiliar. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked without even looking up from her phone, and I felt something flinch inside of me. Her tone was so distant that I found it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, but didn't know where to start. "Lisa, why aren't you answering your phone?" "I'm worried, Anna," she sighed and finally put the phone down. "Mom, you don't have to worry. I've decided everything." These words were like a blow. If I had been ready for it, maybe everything would have been easier. But I was not ready. What do you mean?" I couldn't say anything else. And then she said something I could never have imagined. "Mom, I think you have already realized that this apartment is no longer yours. It is mine. You gave it to me, and now I'm not going to live here with you. You have to find another place." It was as if I had been electrocuted. My brain could not accept this. It was a blow to the heart. Moya, only Lisa, my only child, whom I tried so many times to give the best, and here she is. She said it so coldly, so emotionlessly that I couldn't believe it. "Lisa, are you serious? You always said you wanted me to be with you, to help you, support you." That was back then. Now I have other plans. I want to decide for myself how to live without you. You decided everything for me by giving me an apartment, and now your mission is complete. I don't want you to stay here." I stood there, unable to say anything. It was more than a betrayal. It was a real cold rejection of me. I couldn't understand what had happened. How had this become possible? "Lisa, you realize that I gave you everything I had. I have nothing else. I'm homeless." I felt tears clouding my eyes. She didn't respond, just turned back to the phone. I was confused, not knowing if it was just a dream or if my daughter was really pushing me away. "Mom, I can't help you anymore. I have my own things to do, my own problems. And I don't want to carry this burden anymore," she said, not even looking at me. The same words I had heard from other people when they refused to help. The same phrases that sounded like a sentence. I can't take it anymore. I have to live my life. But this was my daughter. My child, whom I loved with all my heart, and whom I considered the closest person to me. How could I have been so blind? Now I realized that it was all part of her plan. She was just waiting for the right moment to put an end to our story together. She got what she needed, an apartment. And now she didn't need me anymore. My thoughts began to tear up. How could my Lisa be so cruel? How could she so easily abandon her own mother, who had given her everything she could? It was terrible. It was treacherous. The worst part was that now that I was alone, I realized that there was really nothing left. My child, who promised to be there for me, who was my best friend and support, was gone. And I was left with only pain and loneliness. All these years, all my contribution to her, seemed to be in vain. My legs were shaking when I left Lisa's apartment. All my attempts to understand, to talk, to ask what happened, were in vain. Now I realized that if I wanted to change something in my situation, I needed to turn to other people. But when I called my brother, he only replied sadly that he could not help. We all have our own problems. Don't expect help from us." His words were as heavy as a stone. I felt like my life was coming to an end. The feeling of helplessness was growing every day. I could not accept the fact that my own daughter had abandoned me, and even other relatives could not or did not want to support me. Everyone, as one person, turned away. I didn't even know what to do next. All these years I had thought that family was something I could rely on, but now it seemed to me that I was alone. I decided to turn to my sister because we had a very close relationship. To Alla, she has always been my support in difficult moments, and I hoped that at least she would understand me. But even here I didn't get what I expected. Are you serious? Her words were almost as cold as Lisa's. And you gave her an apartment, and now what? She can live as she wants. You should have known that this would not solve all the problems. Her words immediately pierced me to the core. Then how could you be so indifferent to what I was going through? It wasn't just an apartment, it was a part of me, a part of my love, which I gave to my child, hoping that she would appreciate and understand it. But instead, she pushed me away, and even my relatives, who had always been on my side, could not find the strength to support me. The more I tried to ask for support, the more I was convinced that no one understood my feelings. The words from my relatives, as well as from Lisa, were a heavy blow to me. You shouldn't have done that. It was your mistake. These words plunged me deeper and deeper into despair. What did I do wrong? And I was ready to do anything to help my daughter, anything to make her happy. And instead of feeling grateful, I received only coldness and rejection. I sat in an empty room and thought about everything that had happened. My thoughts raced in different directions. Perhaps I was too naive. Had I really made a mistake by giving Lisa this apartment? But what if I had kept it for myself? Then I would have been alone in four walls, without help. I wouldn't even be able to take care of myself in my old age. All these questions pressed on me again and again. I realized that I couldn't go on any longer. Every day was dragging on like an eternity. I didn't know who else to turn to for help. I felt so lonely that it seemed as if I had lost all my strength. How did it happen that I found myself at the very bottom, without support, without hope that anything would change? Why? I asked myself every day. Why did everything happen like this? Why did I give my daughter an apartment that was so important to me and get betrayed as a result? Why was I left with nothing? How much more do I have to endure? All my attempts to understand what was happening seemed to be in vain. All my relatives and friends turned away from me, and I was left with this bitter truth. Maybe I will never be able to get back what I have lost. Maybe I should accept that it's all over. But is it really so? Do I really have to accept this betrayal without trying to fix the situation? Is my life really over and I can't find a way to feel needed and valuable again? What awaits me in the future? Will I be able to forgive my daughter? At a will, there'll still be a chance to restore at least some part of our connection. These questions remain open, and I don't know how to answer them. The next day, when I went to see Lisa again, hoping that she would at least answer my calls, I could not even imagine that it would be the last attempt to change the situation. Holt and I stood in front of her apartment, holding flowers in my hands, trying to set myself up for a conversation. But when she opened the door, my heart sank. Something in her eyes was alien, distant, cold. She looked at me as if I were an unnecessary object that she just wanted to get rid of. I tried to find words, but instead I just kept silent, trying not to show my feelings. Only she broke the silence. Mom, you have to realize that you are an adult. You have to find your own place in this world and stop relying on me. You're not going to live here anymore. You have to decide for yourself what to do next. These words pierced my heart. I could not believe what I was hearing. How can you talk like that to your own family member? Someone who would do anything to help to make her happy. And now she was saying these words with such indifference. I felt my heart clench with pain. I've been providing for you all this time, and now you want me to go out. Is this your version of support? I could barely hold back my tears, trying to speak without anger, even though every cell in my body was screaming in pain. But Lisa was adamant. Mom, it's not me who owes you. You decided to give me this apartment. It was your idea. And now you want me to keep you here. But these are not my problems, these are your decisions. I stood there, not knowing what to say. Her words hit me like a hammer to the head. Why she wasn't just abandoning me, she was openly declaring that my efforts and care meant nothing to her. And worst of all, she did not leave me even a little hope. What happened to my daughter? How is it possible that everything I did, everything I gave to her, and now she decided to kick me out? Every word she said to me tore me apart. She viewed me as a burden, not as a mother who had given her entire life for her. My soul was literally screaming with betrayal. I gave her everything, and now she says she can't provide for me anymore. Does she really think I'm just going to throw my life away? Is that what I deserve? I felt empty. I didn't exist in her world anymore. All my efforts to be a kind, caring, dependable mom no longer mattered. I took a deep breath to gather my strength. Lisa, I don't know how you could treat me like this. Oh, you're my only child, and I thought you loved me. But if it doesn't matter to you, I'll leave. I won't put any more pressure on you. Her expression did not change. She just shrugged her shoulders as if it was a normal thing, and a feeling of powerlessness covered me. There was no room for emotion. I just took my bag and slowly walked out of her apartment, leaving her door behind me. When I got outside, I felt incredibly empty. What's next? What am I supposed to do? No money, no support, no home. I was alone in the world, and my daughter decided that she didn't need me anymore. And my strength left me, and only the cold wind made me move forward, although I did not know where I was going. Could I still find a way back? Or was it too late to change it all? I was tormented by the question, why did she do this? What happened to the feeling of intimacy we once had? But instead of answering these questions, I just kept walking, not knowing where I was going. A few days passed, but my heart never stopped hurting. In AA, I kept coming back to the moment when Lisa kicked me out. Every word she said, every little thing, they left an imprint in my soul, haunting me. I tried to find an explanation for all this, but I never had an answer. Why? Why did she do this to me? What happened to those days when we laughed together, when I gave her everything I could? How could I have been so wrong to trust her? And so, after a few days of silence, I decided to go back to her. But not as a mother begging for forgiveness. I decided to go the other way, to take one last step that had nothing to do with love or forgiveness. I knew that my decisions had to be final. I climbed the stairs to her apartment. This time I didn't take flowers. I didn't need anything but to prove to myself that I would no longer ask, I would no longer cry, I would no longer try to do something she didn't want. And when she opened the door, I was ready. Lisa, I realized that I can no longer live the way you want me to. I can no longer be a burden to you, and I won't live here to be your burden. Her eyes were calm, but something in them had changed. She was silent, but I could see something trembling in her eyes. It was not fear, not disappointment. It was probably the realization that something would never be the same again. Do you want me to leave? Ahoy, she asked, and her voice sounded much colder than I expected. No, I don't want you to leave. I want you to understand that I'm not going to let you run my life anymore. I am leaving, and you will no longer have power over me. You will not dictate how I should live. My words, my decision, it felt like a completion, like the final step. I no longer wanted to be that woman who obeys, who waits for forgiveness. I was no longer ready to do anything to please another person, even if that person was my daughter. I looked at Lisa, and there was something inexplicable in her eyes, maybe even a sense of pity. But I no longer wanted to believe in these emotions. I didn't want to be a part of her life anymore. Her callousness was the final sign for me. Goodbye, Lisa, I said quietly, not even waiting for her to answer. I turned and left. I couldn't stay there any longer. Step by step, I walked down the stairs. It was hard for me to breathe, but at the same time my heart felt relieved. I did not know what would happen next. I didn't know how my life would go on. Would I be happy? Will I find another chance? Would I be alone for the rest of my life? Maybe it was a decision I should have made a long time ago. Maybe it was my chance to finally start living by my own rules. I didn't look for comfort from anyone. I didn't look for confirmation of my decisions in anyone's words. I was just going forward. I had no other choice. When I left the house, it seemed that the whole world around me had ceased to exist, and the street was empty. But the more I walked, the more I felt that this step was not the end, but perhaps a new beginning. And although I didn't know what would happen next, I felt that my heart was not so empty. What would happen next? Will Lisa be sorry? Will I be able to get her back in my life? But is it even worth the wait? Every decision has even more questions, and I had no answers to any of them. I may never know what could have been if we had been together. But I knew one thing for sure: there would be no more of that old relationship. I had made a choice, and now I have to live with that choice. And this is my decision.